Hey, welcome to Sipper Social Club. I'm Jeremy, and today I'm going to try to answer the question of what is the greatest whiskey of all time? The best whiskey ever bottled, ever. Now, of course, it's a very difficult question to answer. No one has tried every single whiskey. Taste, obviously very subjective, but there are some people who have tried what's considered the best of the best, the highest scored, best reviewed whiskeys ever. In this video, I'm going to reference three very reputable sources of people who have tried, reviewed, scored, and even owned some of these bottles which are considered the world's very best. First off, Serge Valentine from whiskyfun.com. Considered to be the most reputable reviewer in the whiskey world, as of the time of recording, he has reviewed almost 15,000 different whiskeys on his website, including some of the most expensive and rarest of all time. Serge's reviews can make or break any whiskey release. Positive reviews will increase demand and forever increase secondary market value. Next up, Mike and Narby from Malt Reviews. Their YouTube channel, which started in 2016, specializes in extremely collectible museum piece whiskeys. Unique to the YouTube review community, their passion for opening and trying extremely rare bottles is definitely admirable and amazing. And lastly, whiskybase.com. The biggest database of whiskey ratings on the planet with over 65,000 reviewers, 1.4 million ratings of over 130,000 different whiskeys. You're guaranteed to find every major release on this site, including some of the very best and most rare of all time. So after reviewing the top rated whiskeys on Whisky Base, reaching out and actually speaking with Narby from Malt Reviews and from Serge from Whisky Fun, I have comprised what I believe are the top 3 consensus picks for the greatest whiskeys of all time. But before we get into that, we have to talk about this man. Silvano Sammy Rowley, a legend in the whiskey world, an independent bottler from Italy. He is credited with some of the best bottlings of all time. Born in 1937, he worked as a sales manager at a spirit shop in Italy. In 1968, he founded Sammy Rowley Wine and Spirits Merchants in Rome, which would go on to become the first non-Scottish independent Scotch whiskey bottler. During the 1980s, Sammy Rowley began bottling cask-strength whiskeys, a rarity at the time. Described by his peers as one of the pioneers of single malts, everything he bottled would be mind-blowing, they said. He bottled whiskeys that nobody even talked about. He put distilleries on the map, and at the time he had the foresight and knowledge to see the great potential in some of the more lesser-known distilleries. Considered a legend by his peers, unfortunately Sammy Rowley passed in 2017 at the age of 77, but his legacy lives on as one of the great legends in the whiskey world. Alright, number 3 on my list is the 1966 Bowmore Bouquet by Sammy Rowley. Bottled in 1984 at 18 years old, it's 53% ABV, limited to just 720 bottles. Currently, this is the number 2 whiskey on Whisky Base with 96.19 points. Mike and Narby have not reviewed this, but Narby said he would score it 98 out of 100, tied for his second highest score ever. Serge from Whisky Fun describes it as not an easy, sexy old Bowmore at all. Almost a bugger, and you have to sort of tame it, but when you manage to do so, it's just splendid. One of the very few total winners I've been lucky to be allowed to taste. Serge scored this 97 out of 100, which is tied for his second highest score of all time. If you're looking to buy this now, in a UK auction, one recently sold for £51,600 in 2018. This year, a few came into auction, but they failed to meet the reserve. Alright, number 2 on my list is a 1982 bottling of a 100 proof Springbank 12-year-old by Sammy Rowley. It's matured in sherry wood, 57.1% ABV, and limited to just 2,400 bottles. Mike and Narby do own a bottle of this. They have yet to review this specific release, but Narby told me it is his number 1 favorite whiskey of all time. He would score it 99 out of 100. Serge from Whisky Fun describes this as stunning stunning. Just a few of his tasting notes in a long list of flavors he mentions are raisins, jelly, very old rum. He says the mouthfeel is very strong, like old pork, grilled beef, balsamic vinegar, even some Japanese sake. He says this is a complete catalog of aromas and flavors, one of his best. Scored it 98 out of 100, tied for his highest mark of all time. Currently on Whisky Base, this one comes in at number 5 at 95.59 points. Now it is important to point out that there's 136 reviews of this whiskey, whereas the other top 4 only have 65 reviews. So there is some variance there that needs to be accounted for. If you're looking to buy this whiskey, some have sold recently in UK auctions at £12,500. Alright, before we move on to the number 1 whiskey of all time, I'm going to give some honorable mentions. Starting with Surge, two other whiskeys that received his top scores was a 1972 22-year-old Brora by Rare Malts and a 1966 19-year-old Lefroy by Gordon MacPhail. Malt Reviews would pick a 1956 Bowmore as their fourth best whiskey of all time. And Whisky Base, their current number 3 whiskey, is a 1967 19-year-old Strathfisla by Sammy Rowley. All right, number 1, the best whiskey ever bottled of all time is a 1967 Lefroy, of course, picked by Sammy Rowley. Bottled in 1982 at just 15 years old, this is a 57% ABV, matured in sherry wood and limited to just 720 bottles. Surge from Whisky Fun scored this 98 out of 100, tied for his very best mark. This is currently the number 1 whiskey on Whisky Base with a score of 96.42. Mike and Narby from Malt Reviews reviewed this bottle. They scored it 98 out of 100. It is a must watch, a true piece of whiskey history. The link is in the description. Acquiring this bottle at auction was actually pretty hard to do for the last couple years. It actually disappeared from the entire auction world for about 2.5 years. And then in 2018, one showed up and went for 61,000 pounds. That's like 79,000 USD or over 100,000 Canadian dollars. Plus you got to add 10% commission on top of that. And then in 2019, the market flooded with bottles, people trying to cash in on that high value. However, prices dropped between 21,000 and 32,000 pounds. So there you have it, the greatest whiskeys of all time. Now, what makes these whiskeys so good? I'm going to link to all the reviews down below so you can read them and watch them yourself. But I think the general consensus of these reviewers is just the complexity of the whiskey, the dynamic aspects you're getting from it. You're getting every single flavor in this whiskey. You're getting the entire range, the entire catalog of flavors, aromas in one bottle, and it does it with absolute perfection. Complexity, balance, viscosity, everything is just in perfect harmony altogether. One obvious factor just being that the casks were that much better back then. Less demand, easier to source a really good cask. Have a look at this. Here's an example of wood growth over the last 100 years. You can tell from the 2x4 on the bottom that many more rings versus the one on top. That old wood taken from a natural forest versus the new one taken from a planted forest, it's going to be stronger, more dense, and quite possibly make a better cask. Let's talk about the age of these whiskeys too, just ranging from 12 to 18 years. Now there is a very good chance that there is some older whiskey in these bottles. I know those 100 proof Springbanks back in that era did have some older whiskey in there. I think it's rumored that they, instead of adding water to bring that to 100 proof, they actually used older stock whiskey, underproof whiskey, to bring that to 100. And that combination of much older stuff with that vibrant, younger, newer whiskey really makes for a good combination, really good complexity of flavors. So very high chance that there is some older whiskey in those bottles. But I think we have to credit Sammy Rowley, his cask selections obviously regarded as some of the best of all time. So there you have it. I know that naming the best whiskey of all time is obviously very subjective, so I want to hear from you. What do you guys think? What's your number 1 of all time? What is the best whiskey that you've tried so far? And also, what's a whiskey that you'd love to try? If money was no object, you could have any whiskey in front of you right now, what would it be? Love to hear your comments down below, guys. As always, like, comment, subscribe. Lots of good things coming up on the channel. As always, have a good one. Cheers.